I've been working with field studies for almost 5 years now, and as a student, I have been involved with field studies for almost 10. And field study students are required to take a preparation course before they go to the field. It's a 3-credit semester course they take the semester before they leave. And the year that Dave K. first went to South Africa, I was helping teach the prep course. And I remember Dave in class, and I remember getting Dave's journals and being like, oh, man, I'm so frustrated. I don't know how to have a conversation with this guy. And and then Dave went to South Africa. He served his mission there. And he came back and then returned to South Africa as a field study student, and was astounding in the field. If anyone who went to the field with Dave the first time, I don't think there's anyone in the room, unfortunately, but anyone who went with him the first time might remember some of his dance performances in a squatter camp at a school that he was working at. And he was an incredibly tenacious field researcher, has an incredible work ethic, and has since taught the prep course for a couple of years for students who continue to go on the field studies program. And Dave is a very thoughtful person, and I think we share in common, among other things, a love for South Africa, and I'm really looking forward to what he will share with us today. So.
Well, thanks for coming out. Like Julie said, South Africa is a pretty special place for me, and hopefully we'll get this PowerPoint up and running so I can show you some pictures. But they asked me to talk a little bit about my experience in South Africa, and for me, it was more than just a research experience. It was sort of a life-changing event for me that has helped to mold the way that I look at the world and the way that I view other people. And a lot of that I attribute to the friends and people that I met in South Africa and the things that I learned from them. Ooh. Does it? Oh, you just click it? Oh, there we go. So anyway, if I pass out in the middle of this lecture, you'll have to forgive me. I was up till like really late last night. Trying to pull some thoughts together, and it was actually really difficult because I don't know, my mind is not a very linear, I don't know. Anyway, it's a mess up there, and so, but I thought I would start out with just sort of a fun little example. The title of this presentation is Hope Through Relativism: Learning to See Each Other as We Really Are. So the first thing I wanted to do was to talk about ice cream. So. And I'm going to need your help with this. How many people in this room like ice cream by raise of hands? All right. Okay. And how many people don't like ice cream? And there's no right or wrong answer, so that's just fine. That's great. Okay. Since the majority of the people like ice cream, we're going to stick with ice cream. How many people think that chocolate ice cream is the best ice cream ever? Okay. All right. How about vanilla? Okay. Rocky Road. What else? Mint, chocolate chip, strawberry. What was that? Oh, strawberry. I heard something. What was over here? Toffee. Oh, like the mocha almond. Oh, that's good stuff. That's actually mocha almond fudge is my favorite flavor of ice cream. Okay, so who would like to maybe explain a little bit about why you think this particular flavor of ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream? Would anybody? Doesn't have to be deep or profound, but yes. Tristan, what was your flavor? Vanilla. Okay, why is vanilla the best flavor?
I think it's the smoothest.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't overpower you the way chocolate can. You can eat more of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like a Berry White ice cream. It's like, oh yeah. Just kind of like flows down. So, okay, and how about, is anybody from the chocolate crowd like to talk about why chocolate is the best? Yes. Oh, we have a microphone back here. Kim's going to expound on chocolate ice cream.
Well, is this on? Well, chocolate has a richer flavor, and you can enjoy it more. Even though you might not be able to eat as much, you enjoy that smaller portion more because it tastes better and it's chocolate. So chocolate equates to happiness.
Oh, really? Wow. Right, and it tastes better than vanilla?
Unless it's from Steers.
Unless it's from Steers. Oh man, did you hear that, Tristan? Chocolate tastes better than vanilla. What are we gonna do here? I don't know. Maybe we should fight about it. Is that maybe no? Probably not. Okay. The point of this is either ice cream really absolutely better than the other ice cream? No, not really. It's kind of up to your personal taste and preferences. And so hopefully, I'm hoping that Tristan and Kim can still talk to each other after this lecture is over. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping. Maybe after a few quotes from Desmond Tutu and Angie Krogh, we can move past this chocolate conflict. Yeah.
I think it's suspicious that you capitalized vanilla, but you didn't capitalize
Oh,
chocolate.
you know what? I don't know. I was too scared to put mocha almond fudge as my favorite ice cream, so. But actually, I actually have a preference for chocolate over vanilla. I'm sorry, but maybe I just didn't want to. Anyway, the vanilla people, I just wanted to, give them some props. Okay, so that little example was just sort of to sort of like get at some ideas. There's a couple quotes here. Dave Schuler used to use in his prep course, his field studies prep course, a book by cultural anthropology book by Ferrero, and in there they talk a lot about cultural relativism, and I'm going to talk today. My focus is going to be on cultural relativism and interpersonal relativism. And then, so Ferrero defines cultural relativism as any part of a culture must be viewed in its proper cultural context. So, in other words, if you're studying another person's culture and you're wanting to understand it, it's a good idea to learn about that culture, to understand that culture, and to interpret that aspect that you're studying of that culture from that culture's viewpoint. That will be a more accurate description of the culture than, say, if I went over and sort of compared that aspect of culture from my own worldview or my own culture. So, it would be better to compare, for example, South African political systems within a South African context in order to come to a more accurate picture of why political systems work the way they do, than to say, well, they do it differently in South Africa than they do in the U.S., and that's why they're having struggles or blah, blah, blah. Because those historical differences and that context really sort of make up the way people see their political systems, and they're very different. And then, so taking it down a little bit more narrow to an interpersonal sort of level. This quote is from Robert Chambers, who's a big development guy, sort of a guru out of Sussex. And he says, a personal reality is a reality is experienced and put together by an individual. From their nature, personal realities all differ. We see things differently. Personal realities are complex, diverse, and dynamic. We speak of a world of multiple realities in which each of us construct our own and has our own way of constructing what we perceive. So again, the idea that we're all different. Although we all are human beings, there are things in our lives that make us different from each other. For example, I really like mocha almond fudge. It's my favorite ice cream. Kim really likes chocolate. And Tristan really likes vanilla. And those are different things about us. In my reality, when I think ice cream, I have one flavor. But when Kim thinks ice cream, she has another flavor. And you can apply this to many different things in a person's life. The way they view family, the way they view interpersonal relationships, the way that they view their education, what reasons they're getting their education, their favorite sports, whatever it is. People see the world differently. So, okay. Then here's just a couple things. The danger of assuming similarity. These are pretty obvious statements. No theory or paradigm has ever captured the infinite complexity of physical reality, social reality, and human behavior. We have social sciences to try to help understand human existence, but none of us are omniscient. Is that all-knowing? And no theory that we've ever come up with has ever really been able to say, this is how every human being lives on the planet. Okay, so that includes, development theories like modernization, dependency, world systems theory. All these are great theories as starting points to help us understand the world, but then we have to understand that they're not completely accurate, and it's almost impossible for a theory to sort of describe the complexity of human nature. So then that sort of taking it to an interpersonal level and often a societal level, yet oftentimes as human beings we use reductionist theories and unilinear thinking to project our realities, interests, and values on others we don't know well or don't want to know well. This has been the cause of much conflict in interpersonal relationship and between societies throughout history. And if any of you have taken History 202, you will know that value systems have been the cause of much conflict the whole time that we've been on here, on the planet Earth. So, what's next? Okay, this is a little chart that I recreated, a little drawing that Dave uses in his class to try to illustrate the different things in our lives, the different forces that are acting upon us that help us to construct our reality, to help us to construct our worldview, to construct the way that we see things. Some of those forces are sort of micro forces, things that are very close to us, like families, friends, our job, teachers. Other forces are more of macro forces, like the climate we live in, technological innovation, the government systems we live in, the religion that we're born into, our nationality, our socioeconomic status, the race that we belong to. And so all of these things on a daily basis sort of, this is what we experience in life. And so it sort of makes up our reality. This is the way that all these things sort of combine in me and the experiences that I've had in the last 27 years of my life sort of make up the way that I see things. And each one of you has a personal reality that's very complex, that's been made up from many, many years of experience ever since you've been on planet Earth, and that includes all these things and more. And it affects the way that you look at life in the world and the way that you look at other people. So, then there's a question. Is there hope for fairness, peace, harmony, and sustainability in a complex, varied world where we all see things different? Is there any way we can ever learn to get along? And that's kind of what the rest of this lecture is going to be about. So of course the answer is yes. And it has to do with the importance of human relationships. If we can learn to understand and embrace others' complex realities and expand our own worldviews, then yes, we can learn to get along. As Tristan and Kim talk to each other about the different qualities of their favorite ice cream and maybe open their minds a little bit, and maybe Tristan's like, you know what, yeah, maybe chocolate does have a bold taste. I never would have thought of that before. And Kim is like, you know what, vanilla is the smooth berry white flavor. And that is pretty cool because, Barry White, he's a pretty cool guy. And they start to exchange and communicate and build a relationship with each other. Then they can start to come to a place where maybe in that specific aspect of their life they can start to come to a common understanding. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to sort of change their viewpoint. Kim can still keep her favorite ice cream is chocolate. Tristan can still keep his favorite ice cream as vanilla. I can still keep mine as mocha almond fudge. But I can understand where they're coming from, and that can lead to appreciation and friendship and an ability to coexist in harmony. So what events in life help us to do this, help us to expand our worldview? I just threw down a few. Being in a meaningful relationship, being in love. I don't know if any of you have experienced being in love before, but that kind of turns your whole world upside down. Losing someone you love, that's very sad. All of a sudden, there's some person that was a very important person in your reality that is not really there anymore. That making new friends, meeting new people, being responsible for someone else. I don't have kids, but everybody that I've talked to say that having kids just completely changes the way that you look at the world. Being immersed in a foreign culture, which is what we do as field studies, is we go and we sort of try to stay away from the touristy things and sort of the surface level, like fun and adventure things. And we just sort of try to just live in a culture, live with a family, walk on the streets, and just try to see what it's like to live there. So those are a few. Are there any? Am I missing any? Can you guys think of anything else? Events that are life-changing? Maybe going on a mission? I don't know. Okay, all right. So anyway, there are things, the interactions that we have in life with other people that do help to change our worldviews, expand them. This was a pretty cool quote this is actually, Dave Schuler has this in his little culture lecture. And a lot of this material came from Dave, and a lot of it came from me, but this is from Dave Schuler. Is it not the feeling of every heart to wish that all persons were to be just like ourselves, to wish that ideas and acts of our fellow men to be precisely like ours, and yet we should not look upon ourselves as an infallible standard for others? Let us take a course to understand men as they are and not endeavor to make them precisely as we are, for this you cannot do. I am myself and you are yourselves. Another quote that I really like that comes from Dave's class, and is Julie here? Yeah. This is a quote that Julie introduced me to. This is President Kimball's wife, and I thought that when I read this in the prep course, I was just like blown away. Cross-cultural sensitivity is essential. It requires more than mere words. It requires that people resonate with each other's hopes, fears, and aspirations. So Kim and Tristan need to understand why they like their different ice creams. It demands that one respect the high ideals and spiritual convictions of others. When going across cultures, he who communicates well also understands the heartbeat of a new land. Difficult, yes, but important. Clearly, the skill is an essential stone in all foundation of Christian brotherhood. All church members must be prepared to give and take. And I think that this has a lot of implications, especially in an LDS context when we believe in missionary work and we're sending missionaries out all over the globe. Things like that. Okay, and this is the part that I really like. This means a giving and taking that is psychological as well as material, a discarding of racial and ethnic prejudices, for example, and a development of empathy and cross-cultural sensitivity. If multiple Zions are to exist in doctrinal unity while maintaining a certain cultural, political, and ethnic heterogeneity, we may have yet a great deal to learn. And I just, when I first read that in the prep course, I was like, wow, this lady is really smart. And I like how she talks about we may have yet a great deal to learn. And I think in part that's sort of what a field study has been for me. It's been an opportunity to learn about other people and to learn about other cultures and to sort of open up to new ways of thinking. Okay, now, South Africa. Just a couple quotes. One from Martin Luther King that I really like. Men hate each other because they fear each other, and they fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they are often separated from each other. And we live in a big world, and in South Africa's case, that was true up until 1994, and even today, to a large extent, it's true because of the apartheid policies of separateness, of building separate residential areas for people of different races to live in. So if you're a black South African, you would live in a black township. If you're a white South African, you would live in a white area. If you're an Indian South African, you would live in an Indian township. And the idea was that no one would ever have to interact with each other because it was easier, because for so many hundreds of years, they fought over different ideas, they fought over the land, they fought over resources. And so a large justification of the apartheid government was, you know what, if we just live in different countries, then it's okay. Obviously, it didn't work out, especially when there was sort of a hierarchy built on race where a minority white group was at the top and a majority black group was at the bottom, and it fell apart in the 80s, and in 1994 they had their first all-inclusive democratic elections. And this is what Nelson Mandela said in his inaugural address. We enter into a covenant that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. There's also this quote from Cynthia Ngweyu. One of the things that South Africa did after their 1994 elections was they had what they called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And the idea of this commission was to get the truth out and to help people of different races to sort of understand the atrocities that the apartheid government had imposed on everybody. And in large measure, it was a chance for the nation and the individuals in the nation to sort of get to know each other, to be able to hear each other's experiences. They were really sad experiences because the apartheid government did a lot of horrible things. And a lot of people were killed and murdered and raped and tortured. But the idea was, like, we got to get that out in the open. We got to get to start to know each other, to understand each other, to hear each other's pains and sorrows so that we can move on. And this is what Cynthia Ngweyu said about the TRC. She was the mother of a young man who was tortured and murdered in apartheid South Africa. And this is what she said, as at the TRC, sort of as she's hearing from the men who killed her son all of the details of how he was brutally murdered. And I thought this was pretty amazing. This thing called reconciliation, if I am understanding it correctly, if it means this perpetrator, this man who has killed Christopher Pete, if it means he becomes human again, this man, so that all of us get our humanity back, then I agree, then I support it all. And I thought that was pretty amazing. The whole TRC process in South Africa, the idea of restorative justice instead of retributive justice, the idea that we're not going to have a Nuremberg trial and throw everybody in jail, but we're going to try to learn to forgive. I thought I don't know, for me, one of the highlights in human history, where human beings have really sort of reached beyond their self-interest and sort of realized, you know what, in order to survive, we need to work together. So let's do this thing. Okay. Whoops. This is Duncan Village, South Africa. This is just next to downtown East London. East London, South Africa is on the coast of the Indian Ocean, about halfway between Durban and Cape Town. It's in a subtropical climate, beautiful white beaches, very hot and humid in the summertime, very rainy in the wintertime. And one of the major legacies of apartheid has been sort of poverty. You have sort of a mass majority of the society who is never really allowed to get a proper education, never really allowed to get good paying jobs. And so now there's a lot of poverty in South African society. And that's something that you'll see. As students, we live in the very rich, nice neighborhood in East London because it's the safest neighborhood. And you go to bed on a nice sort of mattress, and you have a toilet that you can use and a shower that you can use. And there's like washing facilities 20 minutes down the road. And then you go to town, and 5 minutes from town, there's a place like Duncan Village where people don't have access to running water, to adequate housing. And sort of, I think a lot of students' initial reaction to that is, how can this be? How can you have such a polarity between socioeconomic classes? You have a few very, very wealthy people and a lot of really, really poor people. And so my research project dealt with city planning in South Africa and how city planning was striving to deal with issues of poverty since 1994. I volunteered at the local planning department, and I also volunteered at a preschool called Zamani, the Zamani Educare Center. And so this picture up here in the upper left-hand corner, that's Tembakazi. She's one of the teachers at the Zamani Educare Center. She was showing us around the township, taking us to the place that she stayed. This picture up here is just a picture of a couple moms, a couple women, and this little space that they use to hang their laundry and talk and do their sort of business during the day. This is a little spaza shop right here where they sell fruits and vegetables and little chips and snacks and candies. This right here, this is one of the political counselors. That's Councilor Mgazi, and there's a broken toilet, and so she's talking to some of the people in the area and explaining how the toilet needs to get fixed, and they're arranging to have the toilet fixed. And yeah, so maybe I can ask a question. When you see a place like this, what are some of your first thoughts or reactions to pictures like these? Yes, Ben.
It reminded me of Mexico, where I live.
Okay, right on. Yeah, this is very indicative of a lot of places in developing countries, especially urban places where there's a lot of overcrowding. Anything else? Yeah, Julie.
I always feel like it's such a different reality than my normal reality, or the kinds of investment in living is very different than the kinds of investments I make in living, if that makes sense.
Right. No. Yeah.
Just to get food or do the laundry. It's much different than mine.
Yeah. No. It's very different. Life is very different. In some sense, like it puts a whole different spin on. How do you get enough food to eat? How do you get enough food to feed your family? How far do you have to walk, to get fuel, to cook the food? If you can't afford a paraffin stove, where do you get fresh water? How do you use the bathroom? If your bathroom is used by 2,000 other people during the day and often is clogged up. It's very different. How do you gain access to electricity? If there's no formal sort of electricity. It's a very different reality. The art of survival, and in many ways, I think you have to be sort of, ingenious. Like I couldn't do this. I'm sure I would quickly learn if I had to, but I thought, you know what, it's so easy for me to go to the store and pick up a pack of, pre-cut chicken that has no bones in it. And then I just stick it in the oven. And So, and I think a lot of times, like when I went down there, my initial impression was, oh my gosh, this place, it's bad, it's poor, it's that quickly changed after a while. And but I'll talk about that in a minute when I start to talk about Zamani. But just briefly, Duncan Village is a very, very interesting place in East London. It's the place where the strongest resistance to the apartheid government was organized in East London. In the 80s, a majority of the people that lived in East London said, we've had enough of this white government telling us what to do and charging us exorbitant rental rates, and we've had enough of the police brutality. So they sort of kicked the white community out. They said, we don't want to have anything else to do with this white government and this white community. And for a long time, if you were a white person and you wouldn't govern Duncan Village, it was very likely that you wouldn't come back because you'd be killed. And so in the 80s, there were sort of these many, many different community groups that were formed, neighborhood groups, neighborhood shares, that people put together to govern themselves since they kicked the government out. And then in 1994, that was the beginning of a great transformation. We hear a lot about the elections, and you see people standing in line, and you hear a lot about the national level things. But that was just the tip of the iceberg in terms of changes in South Africa. That country has gone through such a tremendous transformation over the last 10 years that you could write books and books about it for 10 years. Every aspect of society has been changing. One of the things that changed in 1998 was that they redrew all the local government political boundaries, the local government geographies, and they combined areas. They combined white and black areas and Indian areas, and they combined it together. What it did is it enlarged the government bureaucracies. It made these local governments very large, and as a result, having such a large bureaucracy for a local government makes it very difficult for those governments to meet local needs, especially when a lot of the officials in those local governments are not directly elected, but they're chosen along party lines. Another thing that's happened is since 1994, the ANC has sort of had this political imperative to be seen as the saviors of development in South Africa. Everything good and positive in South Africa, they sort of want to capture as their turf because that's good politically. It wins votes. And so a lot of these community-based organizations that were formed in the 80s in Duncan Village to sort of govern the township were sort of squashed when the ANC sort of came in and restructured the local governments. The national government came in and sort of appointed ward councillors and said, okay, all your business will now be done through the ward councillor. And again, that has made it really difficult for the local governments to respond to local needs because a lot of times you have one ward councillor who's responsible for 20 or 30,000 people. There's 80,000 people that live in Duncan Village, and there's about 4 or 5 wards divided up different local political neighborhoods. And it's really hard, especially when, as a planner, when you can't approach the community directly, you have to go through the political counselor. And so a lot of times public meetings are very dull, they're very dry, they're not very interactive. And a lot of times they become very political and very heated because people get tired of the rhetoric. They get tired of hearing the politicians say things over and over again and then never hearing anything. Another reason why these local governments have been having trouble meeting needs is because in a lot of the development rhetoric in South Africa, low-income neighborhoods are referred to as communities. And what that basically means is there's this idea, and I think this is changing. It started to change a couple of years ago, but there was this idea that, these communities are homogeneous, that if you have a population of 80,000, and Duncan Village is just a drop in the bucket. If you go to Alexandria and Johannesburg, there's 3 or 4 million people living in a community like this. But there's been this idea that one housing solution will, fit all shapes and sizes and meet all needs. One social development solution will meet all needs. And that's been very difficult, sort of this master planning approach where the planners come in and say, this is what we're going to do, and there's not really a whole lot of options for the diverse needs. In a community of 80,000 people, you have diverse community needs, you have diverse family structures, you have diverse community-based organization networks, And it's been really hard for the politicians to sort of grasp that. There's been a lot of work done on the academic side in South Africa in the last few years to sort of anthropology and sociology work to sort of start to say, hey, there's a lot of different needs in these places, and we need to start to get real about identifying these needs. We need to scale down our development projects. We need to talk to people face to face. We need to talk to their neighbors and friends and see who's interconnected with each other and start to get to know the people so that we can provide well-targeted solutions. But that was one thing. That was one way that I learned about relativism in South Africa, is through sort of like this idea of development. And that, if you're a government official, it's not very wise to sort of conceive of your constituency, as a homogeneous population. There's diverse needs. And in order to do that, it requires time and effort and money to go in and to meet people and to talk to people and to see their families and to see the type of house that they live in and to see and to learn about their survival strategies. How do they get food? How do they get electricity? How do they manage to survive? One of the interesting things about Duncan Village is that, okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Although it's a place of deterioration and disease and overcrowdedness, it's also it's a thriving place of informal economic activity. There's little shops everywhere. It sort of is a symbol of freedom. It's a place of identity and pride. Although it's a shanty town, the people that live there have a lot of pride, especially the older residents who went through the resistance of apartheid and were successful at kicking the government out. They're proud of their little shanty neighborhoods, and they're proud of their shacks, and they don't want to leave. It's close to town, so it doesn't cost a lot to get there. Yeah?
I was just thinking how easy sometimes it is to equate maybe the living standard or to the meaningfulness of the reality.
Mm-hmm.
We come from a very comfortable place. We look at these communities as areas, we consider them maybe their realities less meaningful because they don't have all these economic opportunities. Yet for them, their reality is as meaningful as anybody else's reality. And your description here states that. Their struggles, they're trying to meet the challenges that they face every day are as meaningful as someone that lives in a nice house and has 2 cars.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right.
Or maybe even more meaningful.
And they'll argue with it all day long about that. Like, let me show you how this shantytown is better than your suburb, your mansion in the suburbs. A lot of times they talk about a sense of community and how, if you live in a gated community, there's not really that big sense of friendship or camaraderie. So that's been a challenge for the local governments, sort of these big bureaucracies coming to the realization that they can't sort of be unilateral and one-directional in their development thinking, that they need to start getting to know people and understand what the realities are on the ground. Okay, this is my favorite part. That previous thing that I just shared with you was sort of the research, but this was sort of like the life-changing experience that I had in South Africa. I got to volunteer at a preschool called Zamani that was started by a woman named. Is that a glass of water here? Okay, never mind. Misa Yo-Yo. No, you're fine. It's just when I talk a lot, I can't click very well. So, and in 1995, right after the end of apartheid, she sort of saw that there was a growing number of street children in her community, and she thought, you know what? I want to get these kids off the street. I want to help them to have an environment that they can grow up in during their younger years where they don't have to deal with violence and drugs of the street. And so she built a shack and opened up a preschool. She got teacher training certified and opened up a preschool. And today there's 238 kids at this preschool. Thanks. And she knows them all by name. And she knows all the parents of those kids and the communities that they live in. They all come from Duncan Village. But before I get more into that, there's this African humanist philosophy called Ubuntu, which in essence, translated into English, means a person is a person because of other people. And this is what Desmond Tutu said about Ubuntu. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished when others are tortured or oppressed. So it's this idea that, in the Western philosophy, we sort of articulate this little saying, I think, therefore I am. And in Africa, the saying is, I participate, therefore I am. I'm part of a community, and that community brings me identity, and that's important to me. And this idea of Ubuntu has really, I think, strongly motivated Mrs. Yo-Yo's desire to keep this preschool running. Here's some of the kids. This is Mrs. Babawa teaching the grade R classroom. These are the 6 and 7-year-olds. And these are the kids at lunch. This is during a couple of recess during the middle of the day. And then this is Mrs. Yo-Yo upper right-hand corner. There was a fire a couple years ago. And so as volunteers, we were sort of helping out with building some new walls and things like that. And she was making lunch for us. And the amazing thing about this school is that Mrs. Yo-Yo really loves and cares about all these kids. And not only did she love and care about all the kids and know all the kids and know their circumstances individually. I mean, that's amazing. 238 kids, that's a lot of kids to know, and a lot of parents to know, and a lot of community networks to understand. Not only that, but she cared a lot about the BYU volunteers that went down there. And she would constantly feed us lunch, once or twice a week, which it was hard for me. It was hard for me to accept that because we ate the same food that the kids were eating, and I was like, this is your kids' food, don't give it to us. They need this more than we do. But she refused that explanation. She says, no, you need to eat with us. And she was constantly thanking us for our efforts to interface with the local government, to see if we could figure out how they could buy land to build a school, to volunteer and help out with the teaching process, to clean up during the day, to play with the kids. And you just sort of got this genuine feeling that she really loved you. She really cared about you. And for me, that was very, very different from I have a family that I love very much, and they love me. But growing up in high school, my high school motto was strive for excellence. And it was sort of all about this idea that if you gain accolades and accomplishments, people will respect you, you'll get scholarships, you'll be able to attend college for free. And so your life should be about gaining and accomplishment and sort of about you, me. And all of a sudden I meet this lady who, probably could leave the shanty town if she wanted to, but doesn't, because life for her is not just about her, it's about her community. And that really sort of opened up my mind to what it means to sort of, love your neighbor as yourself, to build relationships. It really sort of helped me to begin to understand the importance of human relationships. And it started to help me to really understand that, we need to be open to other people's perspective. We need to sort of adopt a little bit of relativism so that we can come to a common understanding. Okay, let's see, what time is it? Okay, so this is just sort of in summary, life lessons learned. First, relationships matters. This next quote is from Rachel Remen. Is that her first name? She's a nurse, and I really like this quote. This is another quote that I got from the prep course. We cannot serve at a distance. We can only serve that to which we are profoundly connected. And you can't be connected to someone else if you don't know them. You have to get to know them, and that requires openness and a little bit of interpersonal relativism so that you can learn to appreciate. Learning to be gentle, open, humble, that's supposed to say humble, and willing to put aside ideology, stereotypes, and judgments in order to get to know and understand another person or culture and to develop compassion, friendship, and respect. Second thing that I sort of learned from this field study experience is that a pluralistic world full of varied realities should be approached with humane relativism and requires the ability to reflexively deconstruct your own paradigms and deconstruct your own worldview in order to be able to say, okay, maybe my way of upbringing, maybe my way of thinking is not the only way to think in the world. It's not the only way to live. I need to sort of be able to deconstruct what I've been brought up. I need to be able to take it apart and examine its components and see sort of how this culture has been sort of socially constructed in my life and realize that, that's not the only way, that other people are taught other things. And being able to deconstruct your own reality and open up and understand someone else's reality, it requires a lot of openness, and it requires a lot of patience and a lot of hard work. That's why relationships aren't easy. And that's why, I think any sort of meaningful relationship is not easy because because it's easy to have misunderstandings when you sort of have all these constructs in your head that sort of make you think a certain way, and then all of a sudden you have to sort of like take those blinders off and start to try to understand someone else. Let's see. We should seek to understand and embrace human differences before assuming similarity. I think that's important. I think there's sort of this, I don't know, romantic notion, you know, you hear like songs, we are all the same, let's come together, and we're all human beings. That's true at a very, very basic level. But we're also very different as well. And I think that it's important to recognize and embrace that difference. I think that there's lots that we can learn from each other if we recognize that we don't always see the world the same way, and that we can learn from another person's perspective. Okay, so this is, I'm not going to go through all this, but this is from Dave Schuler's sort of culture lecture. I sort of summarized it as become as a child. Sort of those childlike qualities of humility and openness and non-judgmentalism. Children don't really have a lot of qualms on who they're friends with. You know, it's just usually whoever's closest, whoever lives next door. At least that's how my experience was growing up. And I don't think it's not until you get to like junior high and high school and a little later in life that you learn a lot of the social constructs and the prejudices and things like that. So I think, I don't know, these are some of Dave's characteristics of a good field study student. I think they're good characteristics just for life. Things like being flexible, adaptable, easygoing, friendly, patient, tolerant, content, teachable, observant, curious, always thinking, always asking questions, compassionate, giving, kind, but no Mother Teresa syndrome, a zeal for life and love, social and moral courage to make the world a better place. Those aren't things that just apply to field studies. Those are life characteristics. Okay, what else? More important lessons. We are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. A little relativism, reflexiveness, understanding, compassion, enlightened self-interest can lead to the realization that we all have something to contribute to creating a positive sum, sustainable world. We live in a world that's very self-interested. States are very self-interested. People are very self-interested. And I think we're coming close to a place where in order to live sustainably as a human society on this planet, that we're going to have to come to the realization that compromise and interconnectedness and understanding are going to be very important in the future so that we can all sort of live on this planet without, I don't know, blowing each other up or depleting our resources. So, okay, to prove this, we need to quantify the good that flows from this sort of worldview. There's an example in this book called Beyond the Miracle by Alistair Sparks where he documents a lot of the 94 to the present in South Africa. And he gives an example of a rich businessman in Johannesburg that decides to open a free university. And the rationale that this rich young man gave for sort of investing all this money in the university was that, you know what, if you're too poor to buy my products, then that's not good for my business. So I've got to realize that helping you out actually helps me out. There's this idea of enlightened self-interest, that we're connected, and that, you know, we need to have a little bit of compassion and selflessness in our business dealings and in our lives so that the whole can be made greater, not just an individual part of the whole. And then lastly, love is a motivating key to unlocking a more humane, harmonious world. Help pass it along so that it can gain momentum. And I know that's kind of a, I don't know, hokey thing to say, but it really is true. This world that we live in does need more love and more unselfishness and more moral courage and more of the good side of human nature. It's very easy to sort of be self-interested and sort of fall back on those things that make you comfortable and that, you know, help you to survive. But in order to sort of do that as a community, as a whole, it requires a little bit of sacrifice and unselfishness and compassion. So anyway, that's all I have. Are there any questions? I have a little music clip that I can share with you after questions about that. It's from a band called Freshly Ground, which is a new band in South Africa, and it sort of like epitomizes this idea of getting to know each other and getting to love each other and things like that. It's very hippie-ish, so I think it's cool.